D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, Derek Mason out today. He will be back tomorrow. David Janes also out today. Connor Newt filling in admirably for David Janes, who I assume was partying so hard after his Ravens won their playoff game against the Pittsburgh Steelers over the weekend. And we will get into NFL wildcard weekend. I'd like to pat myself on the back. Before we do that, I would like to pat myself on the back for my Commanders selection. I was certain the Commanders would win that game. The divisional doink. Hitting the field goal, bouncing off the upright, and then, but Washington wins its first playoff game in like 20 years. We will get into the NFL wild card. We will get into many other things as it relates to the Tennessee Titans, even the little Nashville Predators today. But let's start with what was an interesting piece of breaking news this morning. Ran Carthon, the recently disposed general manager of the Tennessee Titans, appeared across the street and did an hour-long interview. And I listened to it as much as I could. And I was left a little empty. And Willie, I understand, and we'll get into this. I'm going to put my journalism hat on here in this segment. I understand that Ran Carthon is most likely bound by some sort of non-disclosure agreement as part of his dismissal. So I understand that there are probably things that he cannot address. And those things are probably the things that all Titans fans want to hear about.
Right.
About what happened behind the scenes, Amy Adams Strunk, Chad Brinker, all of those things. But it did not appear that there was much of an attempt across the street to ask those questions. And that's where, as a seasoned journalist, that's why I turned off that interview and was disappointed by its outcome.
Yeah, two things jumped out at me during that interview. One, I don't think he would have done it had it not been people he was clearly comfortable with having a conversation. And I agree with you. I don't know that it really helped him at all to do it because he chose not to. I think it seemed to be agreed on the front end that he was not going to really address nearly every single thing that has been brought to light or been called into question, shall we say. And there's a lot of questions that we have as to what about the relationship with X? What about the relationship with Y? Where do you think it went south? What about this? They barely scratched the surface on any of that stuff. So, yes, I listened for an extended period of time, hoping to get some answers, some clarity, something that we could say, okay, well, here's the perspective of the guy that just got made the fall guy, right? I think he is probably. I saw it reported that he is still under contract for like 4 more years. So if you listened, I got the sense he's not in any hurry to go anywhere. He said, I might stay in Nashville with my family for a long time. And at the same time, he'll probably see what comes his way. But to dive back in and I got to go find a job period of time, probably pretty well. Even if he doesn't do anything. And that's his choice. That's what happens when you get fired. That is the parachute that you have is whatever you've got remaining on that deal, they've got to pay you. So that was that. I understand if there was some sort of agreement, hey, don't rock the boat. So even if he could, because what you're saying could be true, that there is an agreement not to go public. This is the terms of our separation. But even if he could blast the team or really get down and dirty with what the answers to the questions we all have are, Is that the best move for him to do as the guy that just got fired? That may not be the best approach anyway, which is why he probably shouldn't have done it. The other part, the second part that jumped out to me, Rand Carthon is an enjoyable person to listen to. He has a personality, and that did come across in the interview with the host that did it. I thought that is one thing that really shined through. He's comfortable talking with them. I said to myself, right within 5 minutes of the interview, why wasn't he doing this weekly with those guys, gals, throughout the whole process? That would have helped him tremendously. Connect with the audience. Connect with your fan base. Buy yourself some time through the tough times. Yeah, there would have been some uncomfortable weeks, I'm sure. I've seen it done by his predecessors. Floyd Reese is the number one example. We see it each and every week on this station with Barry Trotz. Do you think Barry Trotz has had some uncomfortable Tuesdays with Jared Stillman? Very uncomfortable. They've been awful. They've been a huge disappointment. But has Barry Trotz ducked the interviews? Not at all. He answers the questions. He comes through as human. He comes through as, I'm fighting for this team. I'm going to get us through this. Rand Carthon could have done that. He chose not to do that. And the question has come up by a lot of us that was he restricted? Was he told by the organization, you can't do interviews? I have talked to as many people as I can on this. I do not believe that is the case. I believe that he chose to do it this way. He absolutely could have addressed the media in a number of different ways. He philosophically, I do believe he said this on the record at some point. I have to go back and look, that the season is the coach's time.
I remember this.
The off season is more when you hear from the GM. That was his way of going about it. I do not think that helped him at all.
I would agree with that. By the way, one piece of NFL breaking news, according to Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, Mike McCarthy is out as head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
Ooh, so it sounds like Jerry Jones said, oh, you want to go? People are calling. You don't really want to be here? Well, then don't be here.
So according to Tom Pelissero.
So it sounds like he's got a place he's going to go. Who was it? Was it the Bears that are making overtures? Like they wanted to trade for, wasn't there a report that somebody wanted to trade for him?
Adam Schefter says Mike McCarthy is not expected to return to Dallas and is now set to become a free agent. Per source, the two sides engaged in no discussions about a new deal, and McCarthy is expected to be a candidate in Chicago and New Orleans.
Okay. I thought that there was something, I think it was from Schefter, saying, and this is, again, the dynamics of using the media, right? Somebody if you want something out there, you tell Adam Schefter, right? Adam Schefter puts it out there. So-and-so, I think it was the Bears, have called and asked permission to speak to McCarthy. And the Cowboys have an answer. Then Jerry Jones a day or two later says, oh, they've called? You don't really want to be here? I would say if somebody calls and go ahead. I think they had gotten to that point. So Jerry Jones, I think, decided, hey, let me read how this guy wants to be. If he really wants to dig in and be the coach of the Cowboys, then all right, I'll take that into account. But if he kind of has one foot out the door and he wants to play the power game, we're not going to play that game. He can go, which is his right. He's the owner.
So back to Rand Carthon, I'm going to put on, as I said, my journalism hat here. I am a journalist by trade. I went to journalism school. I've worked as a journalist for more than 10 years. I'm going to put on my journalism hat. I'm pantomiming for those on the stream, putting on a hat. I don't have a hat with me, but I'm putting on my journalism hat. Who knows what it actually looks like? Maybe it's one of those hats that has the little spinny, the beanie with the little propeller on the top. Who knows? I understand that there are situations when you are interviewing a subject and that subject is not able to answer questions about specific topics. But you still have to ask the questions, even if the response is no comment. I appreciate the question. However, I am not allowed to answer this question, so on and so forth. From what I heard of this interview across the street, there were few attempts to ask such questions. Now, I don't know if there was an agreement beforehand with Rand Carthon, who said, I will come on your station, but you will not ask me about X, Y, and Z. If it were me, if those were the conditions, I would not have done the interview. There were questions about what he was listening to right now. I say this as respectfully as I can. We don't care. We don't care what what's on Rand Carthon's playlist. We don't. So,
and I think that would have been something that would have been, for example, a great thing to have in a weekly visit that could have been part of how you get to know somebody, how you connect with the audience. But your point is well taken. For this particular interview, that probably wasn't a pertinent thing that the listeners wanted to hear. Is that where you're going with that?
Yes. If you are able to get the first interview with the general manager of the football team, who rarely did interviews, that's another part of it too. If Rand Carthon was regularly if
he had already done a press conference and answered these questions to the media somewhere in a hotel or his home or somewhere he felt comfortable to say, I got something, I know you guys have questions. Let me try to answer them.
Mm-hmm.
That would be one thing.
Exactly. So there was added intrigue with this interview.
Right. That he agreed to do it.
Right. Because
I've seen plenty of general managers, they don't do interviews for a while after they get canned, or a coach or whoever.
Right. The fact that we rarely heard from Rand Carthon when he held that position, the fact that he was willing to go on air, on the record, and answer questions, that's a big get. That's a big deal. And when I saw that this morning, I said, oh, I'm gonna tune in. And I was left disappointed. And I say this respectfully to the people who conducted the interview, but the journalist in me was I don't know the right word. I've said disappointed. Maybe I'll go with that. You had an opportunity to answer some really, to ask some really important questions. And this is what I will say, because I'm sure people will call and text 615-737-1025 and say, well, if he's not going to answer the questions, why ask them?
Right.
Because it's your responsibility.
And look, I will say this as somebody who's done this for a long time. I do get that part. That there can be what would you rather not have them on at all, or would you rather have that person on and get maybe some sliver, knowing that you can't go full throttle Jim Gray or whoever you would imagine is the person that's going to be the hardcore journalist. That is the gray area of sports talk radio, right?
Yes. And
I get 100% where you're coming from. But I will just say I've been in that seat.
Yes.
That those two were in there this morning too, because I do think that there were ground rules going in. That was fairly obvious, I think, in listening to it after about 2 or 3 minutes. You kind of knew.
I just think that, to go back to my point about, well, if he's not allowed to answer the questions, why would you ask them? Because it's your responsibility as a journalist or a sports talk host to ask those questions. And even if Rand Carthon says, no comment, no comment, no comment, no comment, nobody can fault you, the interviewer, for not trying. And that's what bothered me the most. There appeared to be few attempts, if any, to ask those sorts of questions. So I agree with you in this sense, Willie. Rand Carthon did come off as an affable guy.
No question.
And I
don't think that's ever been in question.
No, and that could have, again, to your point, that could have worked to his benefit. You mentioned Barry Trotz. We use this example all the time. We know Barry Trotz is an affable guy. He comes on this station every Tuesday and answers tough questions. Jared has asked Barry Trotz in no fewer than 20 different ways, are you going to fire Andrew Burnett? And Barry answers those questions as best he can.
Right.
But he doesn't avoid the question.
Yeah. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, I think there are times where Jared pushes where he doesn't really need to push. He's already answered the questions. And if I were Barry Trotz, I could probably have a conversation and say, Jared, look, I'm going to come on here every week. I'll answer the questions, but you cannot badger me 2-3 times on the same thing to get a different answer. Let's have a relationship here. And I think they have a good relationship. It has been very compelling radio. Right. But the one thing you can't say, Adam, is that Barry does not answer the questions. And Jared asks the tough questions. If anything, he goes, like I said, he goes layers deeper than I think in a relationship like this on the flagship, then Barry Trotz should be even required, right? But he takes it. Barry Trotz, I am really, really impressed with both sides of this on that. And that would be my answer to what happened this morning with Rand Carthon. I think there's a happy median. I don't think a guy should come on and say, okay, I'll come on your show. I'm comfortable with you guys. I appreciate what you guys did for me. I'll come on your show. I'll help your show. In exchange for that, I do think that there should be some wiggle room in the tough questions, but I agree that there probably should have been a better effort. Say, I'm just going to lay this out there. And there were one or two examples in that interview where that was put out there. I'm going to toss you the ball, but I'm not going to put you in a corner. I'm going to let you take this wherever you want to go with it. If you want to get down and dirty, and maybe I'll follow up, maybe I won't, but I'm not going to just try to pin you down and have a gotcha interview, because that wouldn't be right either. Is that fair? Like that is it's different when you go strict journalism as opposed to sports talk radio, because I don't know that the fundamentals that you're looking for can 100% apply here.
Right. I am learning. The nuances of sports talk radio, as I have been the host of this show for the past few months. There are parts of it that are different than what I am accustomed to doing. I can say that in the same situation, if Rand Carthon had called me and said, Adam, I am going to do one interview and I'm going to give it to you, but these are my ground rules. I'm not talking about Chad Brinker. I'm not talking about Amy Adams Strunk. I'm not talking about this. I'm not talking about that. If that list was too long, I would say, Rand, thank you for the opportunity. I'm not going to interview you if I can't ask you those questions, or you're not going to answer those questions. I think that in this situation, even if the attempts at asking those questions were futile, how would you describe your relationship with Chad Brinker? I appreciate your question, but
right.
I can't answer.
I don't think Chad Brinker's name came up once when I was listening.
And that's an issue.
Right. And so I think to be fair, like I'm trying to go through this if I were in that seat, and I've done a lot of interviews over the time, I think of that type of nature. I think it's fair to say you have to ask, you have to ask about Brinker. That had to come out. Even if you say, and there's a way to ask the question, like I was saying before, that puts him in a position where if you want to dance around it, or if you say, I can't answer this, you give him that opportunity to not answer it. But you have to say, everybody's curious about the dynamic with Chad Brinker. I just would have loved to hear some insight there, because I think you could have something that doesn't compromise whatever he is determined not to say. You see what does that make sense there? Because
Yes.
there is something you can get out of that interview that has him say, you can get an impression, even if he can't get down and dirty with everything out in the open that he has chosen not to do on the front end.
So maybe I'm overthinking it, as I said. Maybe it's just the journalist in me. But I saw this interview. I listened to it. I thought it was a good get. I was disappointed by it. The general consensus appears to be that most Titans fans are disappointed by it. One texter on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, why are you guys beating this dead horse? It was a nothing burger. Move on. Nothing burger. That's an excellent segue. Nothing burger. That's a key phrase. To our next topic, because, Willie Donick, the worst kept secret in the NFL has finally been revealed. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. Let me tell all of our fine listeners to tune into 94.9 The Fan tonight for Vanderbilt women's basketball. The Commodores will take on LSU with a 6 o'clock tip-off, and the pregame show will begin at 5:45. Coverage is also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 94.9thefan.com. Vanderbilt women's basketball, presented by Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball, coming to Nashville's Municipal Auditorium February 5th through March 2nd. Go to auprobasketball.com for more details and to purchase tickets.
But I also want you not to take this organization for granted. I've been a lot of places. This is a special place with great leadership, great fans, great direction, great coaching. Enjoy it. It's not like this everywhere. Thank you very much.
That was Mike Vrabel, then the head coach.
Oh boy, you're going to pick this scab, aren't you?
Of the Tennessee Titans. Now the head coach of those New England Patriots. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here. So before the break, one texter said, "Why are you guys beating this dead horse? It was a nothing burger. Move on." Nothing burger. That is the operative word, because Joe Rexrode used the term nothing burger to describe these comments right after they happened.
I, in fairness, I will just be upfront. I was in the nothing burger candidate as well. I was with Joe in lockstep on this. I did not think there was anything newsworthy about that clip right there. But just to wind back the clock, this was a very tumultuous topic while the team was going through a very tough time. And it was right before they traded Kevin Byard, as I recall, right?
If I recall correctly. But those comments, of course, came back up today with the news that Mike Vrabel is now the head coach of the New England Patriots. And I heard Joe Rexrode and Big Joe Dubin go back and forth on this. And what's interesting is Joe Rexrode and Diana Rossini wrote a big story last January at The Athletic detailing the reasons why the relationship between Vrabel and the Titans became untenable. And he did, in the story, they did report that those comments ruffled some feathers within the organization. Now, I think
that was newsworthy at the time. I didn't know that.
Right.
But keep going.
So the crux of the debate between Joe Rexrode and Big Joe Dubin and Jared is on Big Joe's side as well in this, is where the hill Joe Rexrode is dying on is that Mike Vrabel did not purposely make those comments to take a shot at his then employer. That were the comments well received within the Titans organization? Apparently not. But Vrabel did not go up there, according to Rexrode. Vrabel did not go up there with the purpose of, I am going to say this because I want to piss off my boss. They did end up doing that. Rexrode's point was it was unintentional. Big Joe Dubin and Jared disagree. That's not the point. But when I saw the term nothing burger.
That was the point at the time.
Yes.
It is, I believed, as Joe did, and I guess still does. I mean, it's water under the bridge now. But I did not read into those comments and say to myself, boy, that was an intentional pot shot at the Titans. I think you can be fully all in, doing your job for the Titans, and also be fully appreciative of how great you had things during your time with a different organization. I think you can do both. Now, I don't know Mike Vrabel. So is he the diabolical kind of mind? Is he the person that's wired to say, you know what, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to ruffle some feathers. I'm going to take a shot. People can read into it what they want. I don't know if he's like that or not. But I didn't read into it like that. I think you absolutely can be fully dedicated to be your coach of the Titans and also say exactly what he said about the Patriots, that it was a very special time and a very unique run of success that really hasn't been duplicated in the NFL since the salary cap was a thing. So I was with Joe on that.
The report said that the two of them, Amy Adams-Strunk and Mike Vrabel, this is the report last year from Joe Rexrode and Diana Rossini, that Vrabel and Strunk did not talk about those comments after the fact, but apparently festered.
Right.
As a result.
This was the article, though, that was written after he was fired.
Yes.
Right. That wasn't written right after he came back from that appearance, because there was a whole half a season that had to be played. That was during the Titans bye week, right? If I recall correctly. They had the bye week after they came back from London and lost to the Ravens. he goes to New England and makes these comments. They come back the next week and trade Kevin Byard before the Falcons game, which was the Will Levis coming out party where he threw 4 touchdown passes. So that was quite the week, right? They won the game after they traded Byard, and Levis, like, hey, what do we have here in Will Levis? So that was, to me, in the moment, I wasn't really worried about what he said in New England at all. But a lot of people took those comments and really delved into them and analyzed them and read into them very, very deeply.
So in that same report from Joe Rexrode and Diana Rossini at The Athletic last January, here were a couple of the major points. This is quoting from the article. During the hiring process to replace GM John Robinson, who was fired by Strunk late last season, Vrabel made 2 comments to Strunk that created friction between them, 3 team or league sources said. Vrabel wanted full control over the roster, saying that he had earned it. And Strunk pointedly disagreed. Strunk has carried a belief over the years that head coaches shouldn't have full control, pointing to the way things went for the Titans in the later years of Jeff Fisher's tenure and watching from afar the issues that transpired for the Patriots with Bill Belichick and Bill O'Brien with the Texans. When Rand Carthon was close to getting the job, Vrabel told Strunk he liked Carthon, but didn't feel he was ready to become an NFL general manager. Vrabel's suggestion, the Titans hire Carthon as the assistant GM, a promotion from his position as number 3 in the Niners pecking order. Strunk did not take kindly to this suggestion, and team sources believe her and Vrabel's relationship took a hit as a result of that conversation. And Willie, you asked an interesting question yesterday as we were planning the show. What if the Titans had acquiesced to Mike Vrabel? What if he said, I want full control over the roster? You could hire Rand Carthon, but he's going to be assistant general manager. Ryan Cowden is reportedly who we wanted to be GM, who, by the way, according to Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports, is expected to join Mike Vrabel in New England. But I thought this was an interesting exercise, Willie. You wondered, what if all of the things that Vrabel wanted that he didn't get, what if he had received those from the Tennessee Titans? What if Amy Adams Strunk gave him full control over the roster, that Rand Carthon was hired in a lower position? I think it's a fascinating way to look back at history.
Yes. There's a few things that come to mind with that, because I do think that was a critical point in this whole where they are now, the decisions that they made then. And you can even go back, the decision to fire John Robinson obviously started the whole chain of that, because they had a GM and a coach that seemed to be on the same page for a long time. Knowing in the context of the NFL, a GM and a coach usually don't stay together more than about 3 years, right? So they were already well past the normal window that 2 guys work together. But they seemed to have good rapport, similar views on how to build a roster. Now, there was the A.J. Brown trade, but at the same time, I think they saw eye to eye on a lot of things. They were comfortable with one another, even though I think they both knew that the misses that they had in the 3 drafts and the trade of A.J. Brown the car was headed for trouble, right? They were heading for some tough times that they knew they were going to have to get through, and it was going to be tricky. Then Amy Adams unexpectedly, impulsively, maybe, cans Robinson. And so now Mike Vrabel is, okay, what do we do? I got to do something. I want my guys. Mike Vrabel, I think we know one thing about his tenure. He likes his guys. He will be loyal to his guys, and he will die on the hill with his guys. Rand Carthon was not one of his guys, right? But they brought him to the table. So I thought that was a reasonable suggestion by him. Hey, let's bring him in, but let's not make him the man. And let's let him grow into the job, and let's have him work with my guys. That could have been a compromise that obviously Amy Adams Strunk did not go for. But I do wonder what if, because my sense is they still would have struggled because of what we talked about, lack of foundational players that allow you to win once a window is closing. When you're changing your quarterback, you're moving on from Derrick Henry. Now, maybe if Mike Vrabel stays, they try to keep Derrick Henry, but he would have been expensive. That would have taken him down another track. It's a really good question. So what are your thoughts on that? I still think they would have struggled even if they had kept Vrabel and allowed him to bring in, quote, his guy as the GM and not Rand Carthon?
It's a good question because although Mike Vrabel is not a Bill Belichick disciple in the sense that he was not a coach for Bill Belichick, he's not part of the Belichick coaching tree. Obviously, he played for Belichick. He played in that organization. But Vrabel is a bit Belichickian, if we want to make that an adjective. He is a bit Belichickian. He does have that, to borrow the term I used from to describe Chad Brinker, that supreme ruler energy. Like,
Right.
I want things my way, and this is just how it's going to be.
A Bill Parcells quote from the past is, if you want me to cook the dinner, then I should be able to select the groceries.
Mm-hmm.
And so Bill Parcells got that in New England, and I think Belichick learned from that. And so that model was one thing, that if you've got the supreme leader as your coach, there is a model that suggests that he can be tied into the personnel decisions as well,
and
be the leader of that.
And the Patriots are going back to that model by hiring Mike Vrabel. When the Patriots moved off of Bill Belichick, I believe a year earlier than anticipated, and they had Gerard Mayo, who I believe had it in his contract that he would succeed Bill Belichick.
Mm-hmm.
What was the one word that Robert Kraft was using to describe the new situation? Collaboration. Where have we heard that word before? And we saw what happened in New England this past season. It feels like Robert Kraft hiring Mike Vrabel is this sort of tacit admission that what Kraft had wasn't all that bad. And maybe, hey, it worked despite the issues that I may have had with Bill Belichick. It did work for a long time. Now, there's the Tom Brady element of it too, but it did work for a long time. So, I feel like the Patriots, they saw how it was for one season where everybody was getting along and there was unity and togetherness. And we saw what the record was. And maybe this is Robert Kraft saying, maybe I should have it the way I've been having it for however long Bill Belichick was there, forever.
Right. It sounds great, but what is also common with the Patriots roster right now? They haven't drafted well. Who are their 3, 4, 5 best players that they have drafted and are building around? They have messed that up big time. So for all the talk about this great thing that they had with Belichick got through with Brady, right? And they made some shrewd moves. They knew what kind of veterans they were looking for, but they did not replenish the well with good drafting. And just take a look at what they are right now. And that's the ironic thing about what Vrabel takes over. They think they have the quarterback, Drake May. We'll see. He had some moments. He looks like he's got potential, but he still hasn't, we still have to see whether he really blossoms and turns into what they hope he will be. But for him to succeed, their roster better get a lot better. Their roster is not very good at all. At all. Take a look at their draft picks the last few years.
No, it's not been good.
So I don't know that there's the instant Vrabel, let's go back to the old school. We're going to bring in Josh McDaniels. We'll bring in my guys and Ryan Count, and we're going to get the gang together, and it's going to be great right away. I think it's going to be a struggle. At least for a while.
615-737-1025. So this is the question I have for all of you at 615-737-1025. What if Mike Vrabel had gotten everything that he wanted? I read the report from Joe Rexford and Diana Rossini from last January. He wanted full control over the roster. He wanted Rand Carthon hired in a lower tier position. What if the Titans had acquiesced to Mike Vrabel's demands and he was still here and he was the supreme ruler of football? How would things be different for these Tennessee Titans? I would love to know what you think. 615-737-1025. And Preds fans, don't miss Smashville Live this Wednesday night at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs at 6 o'clock. Player guests this week, Jeremy Lozon and Cole Smith. So that's this Wednesday night at Brewhouse South in Cool Springs, Smashville Live, 6 o'clock.
Hey, this is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge at Cool Springs MD for some time now. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a goal to shed some extra pounds, only to face disappointment or come up short. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D Mays, Fingan, the Donic, 1025, 1063 the game. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Talking Mike Vrabel being hired by the New England Patriots. I believe his introductory news conference is happening as we speak. So if Mike Vrabel takes any other thinly veiled shots at his ex-employer, we'll let you know. But Mike Vrabel, hired by the New England Patriots yesterday. And my question to all of you at 615-737-1025. Had Mike Vrabel been given what he reportedly wanted, according to Joe Rexrode and Diana Rossini of The Athletic, full control over the roster, Rand Carthon being hired maybe as an assistant GM instead of the actual GM, how different would the Titans be today? And as I was absorbing all of this news yesterday, Willie, they were talking about it. The ESPN NFL Countdown crew was talking about it because it happened during their show. And Teddy Bruschi, who of course played with Mike Vrabel in New England, was effusive in his praise of Mike Vrabel. But he said something that I thought stood out. He said, in part, quote, Vrabel isn't going to joke around. Vrabel is going to tighten the screws. In my opinion, there are some people in the front office that need to be told, you don't know what you're doing and you need to take a step back. And that's
he's saying specifically of the Patriots front office?
Yes, of the Patriots front office. And that is the perception of Mike Vrabel. You know, the strongman type. I mean, just look at him. The guy is an intimidating figure. I think there were reports there. I think there was a report last year that he wasn't getting a job because like someone was intimidated by him physically. I'd have to find this. It was laughable when I heard it. But Mike Vrabel cuts an intimidating figure. But I'm truly curious of, you know, would we trust Mike Vrabel's personnel evaluation? What different draft picks could they have made? I mean, as a coach, if you're just looking at it from him as the coach, you know, could he have coaxed a couple of more wins out of this team? We've seen Mike Vrabel do more with less before. Maybe they win 6 games instead of 3. But I'm talking about the entire organization. What would the outlook of the Titans organization be today had Mike Vrabel become the supreme ruler of football?
I don't think I'm trying to go back. It's easy for us to go back and say in revisionist history, they should have done X, Y, and Z. I'm trying to remember what I was thinking at the time. I could tell that the friction was getting there. Sometimes in the lifespan of a coach, it does just run its course, right? There just aren't that many coaches that end up coaching in the same place for 10, 12 years. And you ask yourself, is he that coach? Especially with all of the challenges you have with a roster. I think the best in the salary cap, right? Everybody's got the same thing. It's designed to knock everybody up to the middle or down from the top to the middle, right? Everything revolves around parity with the way they do the draft. That's why the Titans get to, not like your fantasy draft, get the first pick and then the last pick in the second round. They pick first in every round because that's what the league wants. They want to give teams on the bottom a chance to come back, and they want to make it challenging for teams at the top to stay on top. Everybody's got the same, technically or within reason, the same resources to use. So is Vrabel that guy? Vrabel, I thought the best thing you could say about him is that he never had the franchise quarterback, but yet won a lot of games. Did a really good job. Now, he did have a very special running back. But beyond that, his roster didn't knock everybody's socks off, and yet he found ways to win for a long time. And I think he deserved a lot of credit for that. I also didn't think he was the problem when it reached its peak. It was just that the window was closing, and I think he knew that. And I think he knew there were going to be some very tough decisions that had to make. And I think if you do it over again, they may have run it back 1 year too many. That last year that he was there, and they decided we can maybe reach and still win the division here because the division isn't very good. But one thing I will say about Vrabel, to answer your question, I think the Bruschi is a good example. He's got a credibility about him because he was an excellent player on a winning team that most head coaches don't have. If you think about it, most head coaches were not significant star players in the league. Fair? Especially for a high-profile, perennial Super Bowl contender team that he was on. It's very few of those guys. That has helped Mike Vrabel gain a credibility that has everybody wowing. Oh, man, Mike Vrabel, man, he will set it straight. Mike Vrabel knows what he's doing. He's got that with the national media. Fair?
Yes, absolutely. Malika is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Malika, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call, guys. Have we had Mike Vrabel, we would have won. We maybe would have made it to the Super Bowl because Vrabel is tough. He knows how to get things done, even if there's even if there's few players, like when Henry was injured. But we got the loser Callahan instead. I wish it is what it is. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for the call, Malika.
So there's a Vrabel fan. I'm curious too. Vrabel, what would he have been like coaching Levis this year? As Levis being the guy handed the reins, what decisions would have been made differently rather than what they did with the switchover? What ideas did he have? Because he did see Levis for the half a season, right? It looked like when the season ended, that last game against Jacksonville, the great game by Derrick Henry where they ruined Jacksonville's season. On that day, I didn't think necessarily that there would be a change. Now, as the days went forward, that's when I kind of said, "Boy, they really might make a change here." Right? Supposedly, he went to Amy Adams to say, "Here's what I want. Here's what I think we should do. And if you're not on board with this, then you're better off just letting me go." And Amy Adams took all of that and said, "I'm going to let you go." Right? But I don't think he, in that last game or the last weeks of that season, was thinking to himself, "I'm out of here at the end of the year. They're not going to keep me." So he must have had ideas on what to do with Levis, how best to support him, or do we want to go in a different direction at quarterback? I'm curious about all those decisions and where Carthon was in that process, or did it kind of go silent for a while the thing was kind of crumbling down the stretch there?
Dustin in Hopkinsville on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, "I think we would have been 500 or better. I think our run defense would have been much better. I don't think they draft Levis. I think we're on our way back up and rebuilding. With it being known we're rebuilding, not having our leg being peed on and told it's rain. It's being told we're going to be good, but saying we're going to be very competing. But this is a rebuild, if he has say." I hope I got all of that right, Dustin. There's some interesting punctuation in this text message.
Well, but we wouldn't have drafted Levis, but he was the coach when they drafted Levis.
He was.
And if I've been told this correctly, what the Titans have been trying to sell is that when Rand Carthon came in prior to that draft where they drafted Levis, that Rand Carthon's role at that time was, even though he was the GM that year and the GM the following year, that year it was, "Hey, let me get you the players that you want." So am I to believe that Vrabel didn't want Levis in the second round? I find that hard to believe if what the Titans are saying is true, that Carthon was brought in to get Vrabel the players he was looking for, which should be the thing every GM does, right? Regardless of how much power the head coach has. But they have kind of sold that, right? That Rand Carthon's position changed from year one to year two. That he had a slightly different angle, where as in year one, he was, "Let me get Vrabel the players." In year two, it was more, "Here's the vision with my hand-picked coach. Here's how we're going to do everything going forward." To me, it's sort of the same thing. I think that's a little bit of semantics. But the caller was saying, "Well, we wouldn't have drafted Levis." Well, he was the coach when they drafted Levis.
My question for you, Willie, is whenever you get a new job, you try to take things from your previous job, things you could do better, and work toward that with your new job. As Mike Vrabel takes a new head coaching job after a gap year working with the Cleveland Browns, which areas of Mike Vrabel's coaching style do you think that he will want to improve upon now that he has another crack at this?
Great question. My thought is, number one, I think he's going to come in with a certain reverence with the media there. The media is going to look back and there will be glory days a lot. But I think as time goes on, he's going to face a lot of scrutiny from that media. I'm curious if he learns or adapts how he handles the media up there as opposed to how he did it here. I think it's a very unique media here as compared to Boston, which is also a very unique media, right? I'm curious about that, especially coming off of an era where you're winning every year to now a rebuild, which is what the Patriots are going through. They're not used to losing up there. They haven't lost in a long time, unless you're a second-generation fan that can remember the really bad times, early 90s before Parcells built it back. It's been a long time since they've struggled, and I think they're going to struggle. How does he handle the media up there? The other part, I think it's intriguing. I heard Mike Florio say it. It sounds like he's going to bring Josh McDaniels back as the offensive coordinator. And McDaniels has got a lot of credibility in that position in that town. His reputation isn't very good as a head coach, but he has been a heck of an offensive coordinator. That's an interesting one, too. Is that one of his guys? I don't know. But that's the other question I would have when you throw that out there is he going to continue to go with what has gotten him here? And that is, I'm going to get my guys, and I'm going to be loyal to my guys. And you're not going to tell me in the media who's good and who's not, even if you've got questions. These are my guys. I'm sinking or swimming with them.
615-737-1025. We'll continue to take your thoughts on Mike Vrabel, the new head coach of the New England Patriots. Coming up next, the Tennessee Titans are not the only team in the NFL looking for a general manager. Is their GM post the most attractive? We will discuss that next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, The Game. D. Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan here with you. Connor Newt here as well. Derek Mason out today. He'll be back tomorrow. David Janes also out today. So we're here for you, no matter what. Some form. We're here for you. So, by the way, on the television above my shoulder, Colin Cowherd is on right now, and there was a big picture of Mike Vrabel because obviously he's talking about the New England Patriots hiring Mike Vrabel. And every time I see Mike Vrabel, and Willie, you'll get a kick out of this because of the person who said it. My old friend J.R. Lind, who used to work for the Nashville scene, who lived here for a long time, great writer, great person. He wrote a story about the Titans at one point where he described Mike Vrabel as a quote-unquote human tribal tattoo. And I think that is the greatest description of a human being I have ever heard. I mean, like, Mike Vrabel is the broiest of the bros. So whenever I see him, I think of J.R. Lind referring to him in writing as a human tribal tattoo. I think it is a perfect description of Mike Vrabel. But I digress. So the Tennessee Titans are not the only team in the NFL looking for a general manager. Late last week, the Las Vegas Raiders fired their GM, Tom Telesco. The New York Jets fired their GM, Joe Douglas, several weeks ago. I can't remember exactly when. May have been before the season was over. I can't remember.
It was before the season was over because they interviewed Vrabel, and they did not have a GM at the time, which was intriguing, which had you believe Vrabel was trying to push the envelope and maybe get the attention of Kraft. And then, of course, as soon as the season ended, Kraft fired Mayo controversially. And I think if you add it all up, you could theorize that he saw that he was not going to have another attempt to get Vrabel. This was his chance. And so he made a tough decision, and one that didn't go over very well in some circles, because he made Gerard Mayo look like he didn't really get a chance to succeed.
Over the past several days, the Tennessee Titans have conducted virtual first-round interviews for the general manager position. Reggie McKenzie, who we spoke about on Friday, Dolphins senior personnel executive, has a history with Chad Brinker. With the Green Bay Packers, Thomas Dimitroff, the ex-Falcons GM, John Spytek, the Buccaneers assistant general manager, Matt Berry, the Seahawks senior director of player personnel, Ed Dodds, the Colts assistant general manager, Terrence Gray, the Bills director of player personnel, Catherine Hickman, the Browns assistant GM / VP of football operations, Ian Cunningham, the Bears assistant general manager, and Mike Borgonzi, the Chiefs assistant general manager. And we'll have Terron Davenport on at 1:00.
Thank goodness.
Yes, because he can help us sift through all of these candidates, though there was a report late last week that Reggie McKenzie appeared to be the lead candidate. But we'll talk about that and more with Terron Davenport at 1:00. So the Titans are not the only team with a GM opening. So what I want to do here, Willie, is I want to look at the Titans relative to the Raiders and the Jets. And I want to determine where the Titans GM job ranks among those three. Because let's say you're Thomas Dimitroff, the ex-Falcons GM who interviewed for the job here. He also interviewed with the Jets. If you're looking at both of those situations, I don't believe the Raiders have formally started their interview process because they just fired their GM, but they will get in on this soon enough. And more than likely, a lot of the candidates I just listed off will also get interviews with the Raiders. So there are only so many viable GM candidates to go around. So I'm curious about which of these three teams has the most desirable GM job, and where did the Titans land on that list? So there are a couple of things you have to keep in mind as you go over this. The first one, of course, is ownership. All three of these owners, I would say, fall into the category of questionable,
unstable. Unstable may not be the right word because they've been there for a while, but it's just they have an image, all three of them, right? And it's wild cardish.
So, for example, we all know about Amy Adams-Strunk. We talk about her every day. At least according to my knowledge, she does not nix trades based on Madden ratings. which Woody Johnson reportedly did, according to The Athletic. I believe the Jets had a trade in place for Jerry Jeudy, the wide receiver, and Woody Johnson said no because apparently he found out that Judy's Madden rating was not up to snuff. So at least Amy Adams Strunk, to my knowledge, does not nix trades because she doesn't like how the player performs in a video game. So at least she has that going for her. Also, apparently, Woody Johnson's teenage sons have a say in certain things. By the way, one of his sons' names is Brick Johnson.
Yes.
That, talking about human tribal tattoos, Brick Johnson sounds like the villain in an 80s movie with the pastel sweater tied around his shoulders, right?
Indeed.
Yes. Brick Johnson.
And didn't the owner feel compelled at some point to put out publicly to say, my son Brick does not have an official role with the team? I believe I saw that somewhere.
Aaron Rodgers had a crack about that on the Pat McAfee show. He says, like, I've never been fired by a teenager. I guess we'll see. So there's that. And with the Raiders owner, Mark Davis. So Tom Telesco fired. This according to ESPN. Since firing Reggie McKenzie, who is a candidate for the Titans job, since firing Reggie McKenzie after the 2018 season, the Raiders have gone through 3 full-term GMs in the past 6 seasons. They had Mike Mayock from 2019 to 2021, Dave Ziegler, 2022 to 2023, Champ Kelly was the interim in 2023, and Tom Telesco last season. So a ton of upheaval in that position for the Raiders. So when I think about ownership, it kind of seems like a wash to me, doesn't it to you? I mean, unstable, erratic, all of those adjectives apply to these 3 owners.
I think what you can do if you're at least, number one, of those jobs, I think we talked about this some last week, the Titans have more recent success than the other 2.
Yes. The Jets haven't made the postseason in 14, 15 years.
The Jets and Raiders, and the Raiders have only made it maybe one time
in the past 8 or 9 years or
10
so.
years. Yeah. They've had some trouble. So I think that is a checkbox for the Titans. And I think at least Amy Adams Strunk has shown that if there is success, she doesn't have a quick hook. It's only when times have gotten tough. And this is where they're stuck right now. They've gone into this mode of things aren't going well. Somebody's got to take the heat. Somebody's taking the fall. But she did go through a relatively peaceful time when the team was doing well. So I think if I'm a GM, I am looking at that.
Another thing that I think works.
I also have the first pick, which you could start, which is where the previous GM came in and made a good mark, right? He was able to take that and build fairly quick.
The other thing that works in the Titans' favor in this search, in my opinion, is the division that they play in. The AFC South is a winnable division. Kudos to the Houston Texans for winning the other day.
Boy, that stunned me. I didn't do so well in my
David James did pick the Texans to beat the Chargers. The Chargers, regardless of coach, they keep on charging. That's what we saw.
What the heck? Yeah,
on Saturday.
I mean, I honestly was stunned.
I was as well.
When I left my house to go from my house to the arena for the Predators Capitals game, the Chargers were off to a pretty good start. They led the game. Everything was going over. The next thing I know, I didn't watch because I was preparing for the game. I was like, hey, how'd the Chargers game? What's the score? It's 32-12. What? What a total self-destruction.
Absolutely. But the AFC South, with the Jaguars and the Texans and the Colts, is a more winnable division than the AFC West, where the Raiders are, where there are 3 teams, or were 3 teams in the playoffs. The Chiefs, of course, the Chargers, and the Broncos.
Yeah.
So I think
that can change in a year or two. That can look very different, but I would have to say that is something to consider.
And the AFC East currently is ruled by the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be hard to topple Josh Allen right now. So in terms of like upward mobility, in terms of the division itself, I think the Titans are the most advantageous of those 3. So that's another thing that I would, not to borrow a phrase from Rand Carthon, that's a box I would check in favor of the Tennessee Titans. You mentioned the first round picks. Of course, the Titans have the number 1 pick, the Jets at number 7, the Raiders at number 6. All 3 of these teams need quarterbacks. Doesn't appear that Aaron Rodgers will be back with the Jets. The Raiders had Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew and Desmond Ridder. They need a quarterback. I think they won 2 of their final 3 games. So they played themselves out of being in range of a quarterback.
Right.
So to your point, if you're a GM like the Titans were with John Robinson, you come in, you have the number 1 pick.
That's
the world is your oyster.
That's a big help. I think it's I don't think it's a contest, really, who's got the better setup. Now, I will say this. I'm reminded of the movie 16 Candles, which I don't know if you've seen.
Of course. Great film.
Anthony Michael Hall at one point says, I'm king of the dip you-know-whats, which is kind of what you are. That's the Titans are the king of of these 3, you're the best. But is that really saying a whole lot?
Right, exactly.
At this point. You're hoping to get out of that, but I would give them the nod. But that is a question. If one of these, I don't know who they've got their sights set on, right? They've interviewed so many people now. I couldn't tell you how to separate all of these guys and gals who they've interviewed and know who is it that they're really wanting. And does that person also have an offer from somebody else as well? And are they weighing that? I think we could look at the Patriots and say, okay, they interviewed a bunch of people too. But who did they want all along? They wanted Vrabel, right? I think that's reading the signs from afar. That's what it looks like. The Titans Brinker might have, of all those people that interviewed, he might have one that's who he wants. That's his guy or girl. I don't know. But we're just left to say, okay, they interviewed this long list of people. How do we sift through that? That's where hopefully Terron at 1:00 can give us a little insight there.
One thing that I would put in the corner of the Jets is that although they haven't been competitive in several years in terms of making the playoffs, they do offer more stability in terms of general managers. Each of their past 2 GMs have had at least 4 full seasons on the job before the team moved on. So even when things haven't been going well, Woody Johnson has shown some patience with GMs, which Mark Davis absolutely hasn't done. And Amy Adams-Strunk absolutely hasn't done
Not recently. You're right.
So I would put that in the column of the Jets, that Woody Johnson, at least recently, gives his general managers some runway, even when things haven't been going well.
That's fair. The other thing, if I were a GM, I'd be also looking what pieces are in place that I can build around.
We're going to talk about that. But before we get there, Brad is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Brad, thank you for calling. Please go ahead.
Hey, guys. I've been hearing a lot on Aaron Rodgers being a transitional quarterback for us, and I think that's a foolish thing. Everything I've heard is people are like, he just want to run the show, that you might as well not have a head coach then. What about having him play into a GM role?
Aaron Rodgers being like back in the day, player coach, player/GM,
player GM.
Yeah, player, maybe first year player only, and then
how about quarterback/vice president,
which he could have tried, but ultimately did not choose to do so. Brad, thank you for the call. And it's funny that he mentions Aaron Rodgers because
team vice president.
We are going to talk about something Aaron Rodgers related later in the program. I
do think if you hitch your wagon to Aaron Rodgers, there's a lot that comes with it. And I think the Jets took their swing, which was not a bad move at the time. But here he is 2 years removed from that, 2 years older. You know, he still probably could play some decent quarterback for you. But what does it cost? Is he going to come on the cheap? Like, he was throwing to Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. Like, he had some people. He had Breece Hall back there. So his numbers weren't bad, but they didn't win. What would you get? It seems like a desperate short-term move. Is that the best move for the franchise now? I would say no.
615-737-1025. Your thoughts on the Titans GM position relative to the other openings in the NFL with the New York Jets and Las Vegas Raiders. But coming up next, Willie touched on the next thing I wanted to talk about, where the Titans don't really measure up with the other teams. We'll get to that next. Willie Donick, Adam Bingett, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Hey, don't go through another year with high interest debt. It's 2025. Let Loan Pronto wipe it out. They've got the tools now. Loan Pronto's rapid equity loan makes it easy to pay off your credit cards or tackle the home improvement project. Get the funds you need to improve your home's value. Get cash in your pocket fast. No appraisals, no paperwork, no waiting. Loan Pronto has AI-driven technology now, which gets you approved fast and funded in as little as 1 day in a lot of cases. One client, for example, got $150,000 approved in 1 day. Then they took that cash, paid off the credit card, paid off the car loan, and a personal loan, and they saved money in the process. You can get low fixed rates and lightning fast transfers. Call right now and find out. Be credit card debt free. Pay off that bill you've been wanting to pay off for months or even years. 615 499 5780 or go to loanpronto.com. Ask about the rapid equity loan. That's 615 499 5780 or loanpronto.com. Equal housing lender, NMLS 166 1781, subject to lender approval, NMLSconsumeraccess.org.
That's crazy to me because I was going to ask, I didn't know his name, Chad Brinker. So they already, in fact, have a GM who's going to handle GM duties, yet they're going to hire an actual general manager that's not going to have any say in the roster. How does that work with like Rooney Rule, with executive, like all that stuff within the NFL? Because that was weird to me.
So I think what happened in Tennessee was they hired Rand Carthon. I think they realized that they wanted to give him a little bit more support. And so they allowed Chad Brinker to be that person. Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker came in together. They have the same agent. They're good. They were good friends. I don't know if they already were.
Same agent?
Mm-hmm. And together they came in. And when the Tennessee Titans have had conversations with other teams in regards to players and trades, and obviously everyone around the league is talking, everyone always said to me, they do business with Chad. And I used to always say, well, what about Rand? What about Rand? He's the general manager. And I do think Rand had a strong presence there, and I think he had a say, but it sounds like Chad Brinker was really the one doing the GMing.
That was Diana Rossini and Chase Daniel on the Scoop City podcast on The Athletic talking about the Titans situation. Them having the same agent was not something I had heard before, Willie.
I didn't know that either. But I think that's what we're all curious about, because it's really hard to know what it was like day to day. And that's what we're all desperate to know. Why is it Rand that takes the fall and not Chad Brinker? Chad Brinker seemed, according to that report, side by side, just equally as responsible for the 9-20 whatever record that they both have been there for. They both got there the same time. Rand brought Chad in, as I recall. So that one, it's still a tough story to float without people asking major questions. And so Brinker now is going to have, I'm curious how Brinker moves forward in the coming months when they bring another GM, because whoever this GM is now, people are going to want to hear from Brinker, right? And how is that going to work? We talked a lot about Rand Carthon not being out front, not being communicative. Chad Brinker has been behind the scenes all along. He's going to have a harder time doing that going forward now because of all these things coming out there, that he's been the guy making a lot of moves anyway, or at least just as equally as Rand Carthon.
And that plays into the looking at the other GM jobs, looking at the Raiders, looking at the Jets. The Chad Brinker of it all. I don't know the structures of the Raiders and the Jets, but I would imagine that those roles will be traditional GM roles. How does the fact that Chad Brinker is the tiebreaker in personnel matters, how does that play into the attractiveness of this particular job? Thomas Dimitroff, for example, the ex-Falcons GM who has interviewed with the Titans and the Jets and could interview with the Raiders. If he's looking at these two situations, does he say, well, if I take the Jets job, I will be the chief decision maker? If I take the Titans job, I'm going to have to cooperate with someone who sits above me. How attractive would that be for a more seasoned GM versus someone looking for their first opportunity?
It depends on how you view the options that you have. Does he really have the choice of all three? Let's just take Dimitroff. If he's offered the position with the Titans, you could play that game and say, well, it's not perfect because Brinker, I got to work with Brinker. Do I really have the final say? And do I want to? But if that's your only chance to get back in the league, what's the alternative? If you're not being offered the Raiders job or the Jets job, you may not have that still might be your best choice. It's like, you get a scholarship offer from one school and it's at a top level, the major level. And you're weighing that with an offer, let's say, at the next level down, a mid-major level. And you say to yourself, well, this is the major level. This is where I want to play. It's not perfect, though, because of X, Y, Z. Well, that's really your only choice. If you want to get back to the major level, if you're content going to the next level down, that's your choice. So I don't know what Dimitroff is doing, but that might be his best choice, right? He may not have to take a perfect situation, which is why when there's only 32 of these jobs, you're going to get some pretty good candidates. There's plenty of people lining up to do these interviews.
Wes in Clarksville says being a new Titans GM now would be like going and being a GM for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. Jerry is still going to do things his way.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Jordan is on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunted.com. Jordan, thank you for calling. Please go ahead. Jordan, are you there, my friend?
Is that me?
Yep, that's you.
Okay, that's sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chol.
Okay.
Chol, I'm sorry.
Okay, it's okay. Well, my thing is like what Diana just said. It's been going on social media that Chad, what's his name, Brinker, is a big snake. Why can't Amy just hire him as a GM instead of going and try to find somebody that don't have power? That person is not going to have power, just like Rand. And it's going to be, if he is the one making the final decision, then whatever goes wrong should go on him, not the GM. I think it's the GM. Also, Aaron Rodgers is not a good person anymore. You know, he has a bad attitude. We don't want him to come and try to spoil the new, quarterback that we're gonna get. So no, Aaron Rodgers. We don't need him. He become a bad human being. He's old too, so it's not the one that used to be good. You know, now he's talking trash about everybody else. What do they do? Because these are the people who used to give him a 2-time MVP when he was good. The media voted for him. Now he's talking about women not playing sport, but they talk about sport. He's a terrible human being. Thank you.
Thanks for the call, Chol.
Not an Aaron Rodgers fan.
Not an Aaron Rodgers fan.
All right, let's go back to another point he was making, I think, would you go in there with the decision maker seems to be Chad Brinker. It seems like that's not what every GM job has been, maybe not what the past GM has experienced, if it's a guy like Dimitrov who has been a GM before. But would you look at it this way too? Hey, Chad Brinker didn't come in making all the decisions, but now he's running things. Who knows how it's going to unfold? If I do a good job, good things are going to happen one way or the other. So I think, again, you can't be too selective because there's so few of these jobs that are available.
The question I have, and this is where I think the Titans are number 3 of 3. It's something that you talk about a lot, Willie. The young star caliber players on the roster. If you're looking at under 25 difference makers on this roster compared to the other two teams, I would say that the Jets have the most. They have Breece Hall, who's 23, Sauce Gardner, who's 24, and Garrett Wilson, who's 24. Those are premium positions. Even if you want to stretch it a couple of years, Quinnen Williams is 27, Jermaine Johnson is 26. In Las Vegas, Brock Bowers, rookie, first team, all-pro, 22 years old. If you want to stretch it a little bit further, Max Crosby, premier pass rusher, 27, although it always seems like he's on his way out.
Jeffrey Simmons is 27, I think.
Let's see how old Jeffrey Simmons is.
I think he will be 27 next
year.
year.
He is 27 now. He'll be 28 when next season starts.
He will? Okay.
Yes, he turns 28 in July. So I'm looking at, if you want to just limit it to under 25.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one to look, because I think you could maybe stretch it to 26. Once you get 27, 28, I think that's a next level, because you become much more of a finished product who is in the window of being in your, quote, prime. And when you're under 25, I think you're still kind of if you're already there, you wonder, is there another level too? And you don't worry quite as much about, is the clock starting to run out on some of these guys? That's why I think this is an important category.
So I'm looking at, like I said, I'm looking at the Jets. You've got a 23-year-old running back, a 24-year-old in the secondary, and a 24-year-old receiver, who have all shown that they can make big-time contributions at the NFL.
And I don't know the rest of their players that well, to be honest, to be able to tell you if they have another 2 or 3 other really good pieces in there but because I'll be the first to say I don't know their roster that well. But
No.
those players you mentioned, yeah, those are premier players.
Right. And if you're the Titans, you're hoping that JC Latham, who's 21, can be a franchise left tackle.
Yes.
But when you're looking at the skill positions, they are missing that player. So
I would even still say, and if you're sitting in New York, you'd probably say, who is Peter Skoronski? I would still say that Skoronski, if I'm the Titans, still would be a player that I would say, I think I'm set there at that position. I'm hoping, I don't know about all pro or anything like that, but I think he can be a good, solid player there for a while. I think he could still earn a second contract. I hope he does, because that's another guy that they really need to succeed. But when you're putting together a list of the under 25, who are your best players, just forget about around the league, but who are your best players? Latham, Skoronski. Who else would you put in there? Sweat would be in there. Maybe Brownlee. McCreary is around 25 now, I think. I think I would put him on a list of
McCreary is 24.
Solid piece, not earth-shattering. Probably took a step back this year, but still a viable person. Like, would you sign him to another contract? Dylan Radins is another one that Brian Callahan stopped short of saying, hey, Dylan Radins had a really nice year. We're going to try to bring him back. He didn't say that. He said, Dylan Radins is a free agent. Period. We'll have to see how that goes, I think he said. But there's another guy. Like, he's not earth-shattering, but he's still fairly young. I think, what is he, 25, 26? Radins?
The issue for the Titans, however.
But so you see where I'm going here.
Yes.
This is a short list of players 25 and under that you think you're building around. They don't have much.
And they're not playing sexy positions.
Yeah.
Like,
other than the left tackle.
Right. But the New York Jets can say, we have a 24-year-old receiver who has 3 1,000-yard seasons already, right? You know, we've got a dynamic running back. You know, we've got
when he's been healthy, he looks very good.
Right. So I think and the Raiders, you know, they look like they have you know, who could be the next great tight end. We'll see. But this season was excellent for Brock Bowers. Now we need someone to throw
and
the
Crosby
ball.
Is legit.
Yeah,
he's a star.
But there always seems to be stories about how he might be on his way out.
Yeah.
He might not want to stick around for the rebuild, but he is legit. So,
is there anybody else on the Raiders that we would put on that list that gets floated?
Not that I can think of.
I do think that that's important. When all three, you still have to find the quarterback, which you know is going to take a lot of resources, either dollars that you throw at a veteran or draft capital. It costs a lot to fill that spot. Unless you want to go, let's get the reclamation project and go with that for a year or two. But that's a major, major thing that's equal across the board. And then that's why I think it's so important to assess the rest of the roster and say, well, where am I on that? That's why when you look at the last time the Titans had the first pick, John Robinson, they already had Mariota in place. And they're like, okay, I've got that position filled. We know what we're going to try to do the next few years there. You had Lewan. You had, I don't think he was not in the 25 and under, but you had a guy that hadn't been utilized a ton in that role that had grown into a very good role, and that was the tight end. Why am I forgetting his name?
Jonnu Smith?
Not Jonnu Smith, but oh man, I'm really going senile here. But
Austin Hooper?
No, years before. This is bad. But you had the tight end that you thought you could be a good security blanket.
Delaney Walker?
Delaney Walker.
Okay.
Yeah. Delaney Walker, I don't know how old he was in 2016 when Robinson came in. But he was a guy that looked like an established piece that you could say, okay, he's a good, solid player that I know I've got. Jarrell Casey would be another guy that you knew you had in place. So you're looking at your roster and saying, who's going to be here for the next 2, 3, 4 years?
Delaney Walker was in his early 30s when John Robinson arrived.
He was already in his 30s.
Yes.
But I guess what I would say, he was a little unique in that when he was with the 49ers, he wasn't really being used very much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you could say he still probably has a couple of more really good years in him. So he doesn't fit the 25 and under category. But that would have been an interesting exercise to do in 2016 before the draft when Robinson came in. I'm sure he went through that process and said, okay, how do I attack this first pick? What do I do here? It's so different when you're not looking at who the next quarterback's going to be.
615-737-1025. We will continue the conversation on the Titans. On the other side, Willie Donick, Adam Bingen, 1025-1063 The Game. Hey, Preds fans, tomorrow it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick to Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexro tomorrow morning at 8:45. Predators and Golden Knights tomorrow at Bridgestone Arena. We will be there for our program. And we have a special treat for everybody out there. Normally, we talk to Terron Davenport at 1 o'clock on Mondays over the phone, but he's here. So we asked him to come in early and sit with us. Terron, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. Coming back, I was passing by, so I said maybe it'd be best to just stop through.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We're glad to have you here. So I would love for your opinion. I would love your opinion on this. Willie and I are discussing the Titans job in relation to the Jets job and the Raiders job. They also have openings at GM, and we're sort of weighing the pros and cons of each. What advantages would you say the Titans have over the Jets and the Raiders in terms of the attractiveness of their GM job?
Yeah, I would say the big advantage that they have is the number one pick. There's a good amount of salary cap room, so they got some space to spend some money. So you got those things, and they've already shown the willingness to spend money. So if I'm a candidate, like I'm looking at that and saying, hey, yeah, I think there will be some liberty to improve the roster. So those will be the big things.
So far, if my math is right, we have 9 confirmed GM interviews.
10
now.
Yeah.
10. See, this is
John Eric Sullivan will be interviewed today.
okay. So John, I do want to ask you
okay.
about John Eric Sullivan, who is the Packers vice president of player personnel.
Mhm.
But through the interviews that they've conducted Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we went through the list: Reggie McKenzie, Thomas Dimitroff, John Spytek, Matt Berry, Ed Dodds, Terrence Gray, Catherine Hickman, Ian Cunningham, Mike Borgonzi. What are you hearing about how those interviews went? And did any of those candidates rise above the rest?
I haven't heard anything, frankly, about how the interviews went. So I'm not going to sit here and say anything about that. But I do know going into it, I know that just in talking to Chad Brinker and talking to Berg Nihil on the call that they made, there's a huge emphasis on the Packers, right? And being able to bring that culture of drafting and developing. I would say the retain part is they want to be a little bit different because the Packers haven't quite retained a lot of their free agents. But nevertheless, they want to draft and develop and build from the draft and be kind of judicial free agent wise. So that being said, obviously Reggie McKenzie, John Eric Sullivan, those guys fit the bill to the T, to be honest with you, because these are guys that have lifelong time as a scout, a personnel talent evaluator. So those guys were the favorites. I think there's going to be a heavy Green Bay influence, though.
So let's talk about John Eric Sullivan, who is reportedly the 10th interview of the GM search. Packers vice president of player personnel. Of course, worked with Chad Brinker with the Green Bay Packers before Brinker moved to Nashville. What can you tell us about John Eric Sullivan and how what could he bring here other than that Packers pedigree? What could he bring to that GM position that would work for the Titans?
Well, I think bringing that Packers pedigree is very critical. And he brings a lot of time in the business. He's got 21 years in the scouting business. He was a scouting intern with the Packers in 2003. And he's just kind of worked his way up. He was actually, and I'm sure the people here, being as though the SEC is so important to a lot of the listeners here, he was the Southeastern scout from 2012 to 2015. And just, SEC specific, if you look at that, you got guys, Casey Hayward, very specific to the Nashville area, obviously down the street at Vanderbilt.
Eckert out.
You got Ed Glacy and
I watched Casey play a lot.
Yeah, very good player. But those are 3 guys that, he directly, because they came out of his area from the SEC. There have been others also, but I wanted to point those guys out. So you look at just the way he's worked his way up through the Packers organization. Chad Brinker is very much a follower and believer in that philosophy. So you're going to see that quote unquote lockstep there if he were to get the job. I personally believe that he is the favorite, and just from some things that I've gathered, he is the favorite. But then you still have the opportunity to bring some other. There will be another hire or two in order to get that Packer situation in there. So that's my belief, the way I see it going. But I mean, what we've already seen is you never ever know with this organization. So
Yes. Now let's talk about the Packers for a second, because from afar, these would be my questions for you. I can see why Chad Brinker says, let's use them as a model. They've been a consistent winner. They've drafted and developed. But I can also sit here and say, well, they've never really had to go search for the quarterback. They've had some pretty good fortune there for decades, where they've had the quarterback position taken care of, and then now you
because
can
of good draft philosophy.
Well, okay, I get that.
Yeah.
They deserve credit for that.
Yeah.
I would contend that for it to go right, you not only have to be smart with who you pick, but you got to be a little lucky as well. And I give them full marks. They hit on Love. That turned out to be a good pick for a couple of years. We didn't know. Like they rubbed Aaron Rodgers the wrong way. So I guess that's what I'm getting at. Are you buying into that is a model franchise that the Titans would be wise to follow?
Yes, I fully believe that they are a model franchise that the Titans would be wise to follow, because there's one thing that you think of when you think of the Packers, and it's stability. And if anything, this organization lacks that greatly. So I think that's a good reason to model it. And also just the calmness, and that's a part of stability. You look at the way that they, okay, look, the draft is there. There's other players on the board, but man, Aaron Rodgers, you know what? Let's go ahead and take Aaron Rodgers. I know we got Brett Favre. Then they turn around and did the same thing with Jordan Love. The one thing draft philosophy I do not like that they did was between that Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love pick, guess how many other offensive players were selected in the first round? 0. So that's something that I'm curious why it went that way.
I remember that being a big issue with Aaron Rodgers.
Of course, they did get Devontae Adams in the second round. So,
we heard a lot about solid draft strategy when they brought in Rand in terms of the 49ers. They had missed on some things. Like they had tried the Trey Lance thing that didn't work, but still were able to build a great roster. And that always is something I struggle with when I evaluate drafts, because we spend so much time, and you will more than any of us prepare for each draft as if you're selecting the players yourself, right? You're really doing the homework.
Yeah.
But I look at the big numbers and year in and year out, how hard it is to hit on picks year in and year out.
Very difficult.
How much better are the Packers, do you think, than the average team in that area?
I would say that they're upper. I mean, you look like just last year they got Ed Jenkins, the linebacker. He was my favorite line. Well, he was second to Peyton Wilson, who the Steelers got, but Ed Jenkins, he's a really good player. He's a big part of that. You look at him, you look at Quay Walker. They've made a lot of. I mean, you could go back further. You got Kenny Clark, you got Rashawn Gary. They've hit more than they haven't, in my opinion. So I would say, yeah, they're upper echelon.
Because if I'm Amy Adams Strunk, especially with where they are, we just went down the list of players 25 and under. It's a short list of established guys that the Titans have to work with for this new group. So what do you think they've been missing? Where do you think the Packers' philosophy has been better than the Titans' philosophy at going to get players?
I would say
the draft.
I would say this though: over the last 2 years, you've gotten a good amount of players.
I do think that
25 or younger.
I agree.
Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Latham, Skoronski, Sweat. I mean, we could go on, and there's a lot. And I think eventually Cedric Gray is going to.
Right. It's not super sexy because these guys are offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and a lot of.
But it's foundation building.
I agree. The last 2 drafts, I think that's something that Rand Carthon will probably someday hang his hat on and say, look at my 2 drafts, especially if they progress from here, as opposed to the 3 previous drafts that were not him.
Yeah.
Right. That which has put the Titans in this position largely to me.
Yeah. The last 2 years has been restocking the cupboard, but it's not always like restocking the cupboard with the, premier brand names. It's restocking the cupboard. Okay, look, this is going to
There's
get
not
us
a
by we can
Bowers
eat with.
or Malik Neighbors who, for a
Yeah.
fan, oh yeah, they got so and so. It's
Yeah.
when a guy is a lineman and he's 21, like Latham,
Mhm.
we haven't seen close to what the best is going to be
Yeah.
from him, and it's not a position that you're going to see a lot of success, right? You only see when the guy screws up and gives up a sack.
Yeah, of course, of course. I think when you look at the Packers, you think of their receiver situation. They always draft guys who are strong run and catch, right? And at some point have some running back in their background, right? Because that's what they emphasize. Hey, look, we want our guys to get the free yards. So I think identifying exactly what you want and sticking to it, I think has been good. Now, every once in a while, like a Christian Watson, you're going to veer away from it because he's just such a beautiful
But Jaden Reed,
player.
right? Jaden Reed would
Jaden
fall
Reed,
into that
Romeo
category.
Dobbs,
Mhm.
Wicks, Dontavian Wicks, who was a guy that I absolutely loved, and I got a lot of pushback about it, but he had a pretty good game last night against my Eagles. Well, not my Eagles, but the Eagles. I kind of like adopted the Eagles this playoffs, this postseason because of my mom. That was her team.
Yeah.
So yeah.
AJ Brown reading on the sideline. I mean, anytime's a good time
He
for
says
a
he
good
does that every game.
Yes.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
But I did get a
Strange.
kick out of that.
But nobody
615.
somehow the cameras never caught him until the other day. It's interesting. He was ready. But that was very intriguing thing.
I have to imagine the sales of that book have skyrocketed in Philadelphia.
But look, whatever makes it work for you. He had a great answer.
Absolutely.
Inspiration.
615.
I'm sure you're going to thumb through a book during this commercial break.
Absolutely.
To be at your best in the next hour.
615-737-1025. Usually Jared has the TD Power Hour. We'll do the TD Power Quarter Hour. 615-737-1025. If you have questions for Terron, get them in now. Willie Donick, Terron Davenport, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063. The Game. D. Mays, Finnegan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership with a buzz. It's always about great service. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, joined by Terron Davenport, who usually joins us 1 o'clock on Monday, but he's here, and that's great. We're glad to have you in studio with us, Terron, for an extended visit. So you wrote a story last week amid the fallout of the Titans firing Rand Carthon. The headline on ESPN.com: after GM fired, pressure on Brian Callahan to turn 3-14 Titans around. And we talked about this last week, Terron. There was a quote in this article from Titans president and CEO Burke Nihill. And he said they want to see growth and they'll support Callahan in that growth, but they're going to hold him accountable. I thought that was some strong messaging.
Very.
From Titans brass about the first-year head coach, who, yes, he did go 3-14 in his first season. He will return for a second season. But when I read that quote, I thought to myself, even just reading it, it's different, of course, when you're conducting the interview, you hear the tone. We didn't hear the tone. But I thought to myself, man, that's some strong words. Those are some strong words in this situation. You conducted the interview. When you heard Burke Nihill say that, what did you think?
Well, I'll say this. Burke went on to say, hey, that's not to say Brian Callahan was told that he only has another year, right? But I think the way things, when Chad Brinker spoke about it, he was like, we understand he's a young coach. We understand he's got to grow into it. But he knows he and his staff have to do better. Now, to Chad's credit, he did say, I have to do better. All of us have to do better. To his credit, he did say that. But he also said that understanding he has to grow into it, we're going to give him another year. And that's when Burke was like, whoa. Nobody told him that, he only has one more year. But to me, Callahan, it's get right or get out in 2025. And that's the way I interpreted, what was said. Because when you tell somebody they're going to, how do you hold a coach accountable? If they're losing, how do you hold a coach accountable? You fire him.
Right. And I would also put in the context of what next year looks like. As we sit here now, it is a rebuild, and Chad Brinker has changed the message. That was the message last year, where I think they sold, we've got the quarterback, we can be competitive. Look at these free agents we brought in. I think they had a different way of going about it. Now I think Brinker has said draft and develop, which would lead me to believe you're not going to fix all the holes in 1 year. This is if it's strictly on wins and losses for Callahan, that's a tough situation to be in. So what's improvement in your mind? That's what I would be asking if I'm him. Like, hey, look, I do think I can get he was great. I thought Callahan was great. You tell me, in that press conference when you were asking him some things, among others, I thought he did look himself in the mirror and say, I am a young head coach. I'm going to be good. But he used the reference of, as a parent, all three of us are parents. You can read all the how-to books, study up on what it's going to be like, but until you're in that seat, you don't know.
Yep.
And he said that. I think that's a perfectly fine reference for a young head coach, and they should have known that when they hired him. Otherwise, go get a veteran coach if you don't like it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. To me, and if that were the case, Mike McCarthy's out there. Go get a veteran coach,
Perfect.
But to me, I think Callahan deserves patience. He deserves an extended amount of time. And I believe he showed a tremendous degree of leadership this year. Being trotted out there.
He was hung out to dry week in and week out. The only guy answering questions.
I made requests to but they were denied. He's out there answering questions, and he did it without a bat of the eye.
Yep.
He showed tremendous leadership. To me, Callahan has earned himself extra time, even though the wins and losses. I don't think you can measure his performance last year by wins and losses solely.
A lot of questions about what the Titans should do with that number 1 pick, whether it's make the pick, trade down, should they take a quarterback, so on and so forth. And this is the question I have as it relates to Brian Callahan. wouldn't it be better for the Titans to acquire a bridge quarterback, a veteran quarterback, if the powers that be feel that Brian Callahan is on shaky ground? Because I would imagine, Terron, that the worst thing the Titans could do is draft Shador Sanders or Cam Ward with the first pick in the draft, and then halfway through their rookie season, the head coach gets fired.
Yes.
So how much should that or will that play into this decision in your mind?
I think that's the $1 million question. And the issue is what veteran quarterbacks are going to be available, right? I think that's the big issue. And that's the big question, because until you know who you have a chance to get, there's no telling what could happen. Me personally, if I can't trade back, so if I could get a legit, like a veteran quarterback, and I'm not talking about a Kirk Cousins, like I'm not talking about that, because you sign him, like you bring him aboard, it's going to be expensive. There's going to be expectations, and you're just putting Callahan out there to be fried even more. I'm talking about a better quality veteran quarterback. If you could do that, you trade back and you grab an edge rusher, you grab additional picks, so now you could do some different things as far as supplementing other parts of the roster. But if not, you're sitting there at 1. I would take Shador Sanders if I'm Brian Callahan, because Shador Sanders is NFL ready. I see Shador Sanders is capable of having an impact like C.J. Stroud did a couple years ago. Now, obviously, there were other things that factored into it. Don't get me wrong, but I could see that. To me, when I look at these two quarterbacks, it's either, okay, do you want to be the Texans of C.J. Stroud's rookie year, or do you want to be the Packers of Jordan Love's third year, right? Because I look at the Cam Ward situation as a guy who still has development to do. If you pick him, are you going to be patient enough with your coach to develop him?
Yes.
Because, right, draft, develop, but that also sign and develop the coach. Give him a chance, to me. That's my point of it.
So I'm interested to hear you say you think Shador Sanders, from where you sit now, and we know there's a lot of evaluating that will take place between now and the time you pick.
Mm-hmm.
But you do hear, you'll probably hear a varying degree of whether he's worthy of the first pick. Is he in that category? Because we can go down the list. There are some first overall picks that have been great, others that have not lived up to that. I guess, could you possibly have your cake and eat it too, trade down a couple of slots and still get a quarterback in there? You think he will be the first pick by somebody?
I think he will. I don't think he absolutely will be the first. There are teams who have Cam Ward ahead of Shador Sanders on their board, but those are teams that are in a situation where they could have, Kevin Stefanski, right? I believe the Browns have Cam Ward above Shador. Now, I don't know for sure, but I believe that. Okay, Kevin Stefanski, he's not in danger of. He and Brian Callahan are in two different situations. Their roster is better too. So I would imagine they would draft Cam Ward before Shador, because there's huge upside. Shador, you're getting a good quarterback that's ready to contribute now. I don't know if he could develop into a Patrick Mahomes, you know what I mean, a Joe Burrow, etc. But I do know one thing: that draft, when Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson were coming out, people were also saying, "Oh, hey, I don't know that they're worthy." But Mitch Trubisky is, and we know what happened.
Right. That's the thing. It's revisionist history, but do you hear, and do you disagree with the notion that this quarterback class is not as good?
I strongly disagree.
And you strongly
just
disagree.
like I strongly disagreed about Mahomes and Watson, and disagreed about Trubisky being the best of the three. I strongly disagree. Yeah.
So we should not just say, hey, this isn't the year to take the quarterback. We should wait and see how the homework does, because some of this stuff changes between now, at least from where we sit and we're covering the whole thing.
Yeah.
It changes between now. Like Floyd Reese always used to say, hey, I can't remember what draft it was. I think it was the Carson Wentz draft. And he was saying, you watch. People are saying now that there isn't a quarterback worthy of the first pick, but they always move up the board.
Always
They
move
always
up.
up the move up
And
the board.
you're seeing the third one get pushed. And now they're making attempts.
Yeah.
They tried to push Drew Aller, who I firmly believe needs to develop. He's going to be a good quarterback, a good prospect. But they tried to push him, right? They tried to push Carson Beck before that. They tried to push. Now they're trying to push Jackson Dart. Now, if there's one I think that's going to move up, maybe not first round, but early second, is Will Howard from Ohio State. That kid could play.
Do you think that Chad Brinker, we go back to the Packers philosophy, and the Packers they've played it perfectly with their quarterbacks of the last 30 years, right? They've had 3 quarterbacks and whenever Brett Favre took over, right? Early 90s.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So they haven't, most of those years, they've never had to look for a quarterback because they've had their guy.
Fell in their laps.
But they're basically 3 for 3 in the last 30 years. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to interpret that, but do you think Brinker has in his mind right now what he would like to do with that first pick? Or do you think he's open-minded and he's got to wait and see what the new guy has for his ideas?
I think he's open-minded, but I think he's open-minded, but I believe that there's one he likes more than the other, and that's just natural. You know what I mean? But it's just really going to depend on this situation. Like, how patient are they going to be with Brian Callahan? If you're going to be patient with Brian Callahan, I'd say, like, I'll be honest. If you're going to be patient with Brian Callahan, go ahead and take Cam Ward, because, man, the playmaking ability that he has and how dynamic he is, it's exciting, but how can you assimilate that into the system and getting him to play on time, getting him to not rely so much on going off schedule?
Some growing
That's
pains
going to be,
that are going to
those.
be with it.
It's funny you say that, because growing pains that's a phrase that came up in the conversation with Chad and Burke. They said growing pains, but see, the problem in the story, like I said, the growing pains that cost Rand Carthon his job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that Brian Callahan can afford growing pains and keep his.
I think the other context is that the last GM that had success in John Robinson, he came in with the first pick.
Yeah.
And he did well. I don't know if it was perfect, but he used the first pick to get extra picks. And I would look at the Titans roster and say they need more picks. They have so many holes. This is an opportunity to get more kicks at the can.
You're right, but the thing was, they had a quarterback at that time.
Right.
That's the
that makes it very tough.
This one has so many little spikes that appear when you try to make it smooth, and that's why this situation is so crazy.
615-737-1025. If you have questions for Terron Davenport, get them in on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. We'll go one more segment with TD, Willie Dunnick, Adam Ving, and Terron Davenport. 102.5-106.3 The Game.
All right, let's talk Lee Company. Nashville Predators back in town. Tough loss against Washington on Saturday where they outplayed the Caps, came up short. Now they've got the number 1 team in the NHL coming in, the Vegas Golden Knights. Why do I say that? Because Lee Company is a proud sponsor of Nashville Predators hockey coverage on our station. We'll have our pregame tomorrow at 6 p.m. The Lee Company display is all around Bridgestone Arena. Lee Company has been servicing people in our listening area since 1944. 80 years of service. They have you covered when it comes to your household, and we've got some freezing temperatures this week. It's always top of mind for you when you walk into your house. Is your heating unit working? And it's a burden if it's not working properly. So call this number if you need some help, 615-567-1000 or LeeCompany.com. That's the short term. And, of course, the long term that Lee Company likes to pitch is the home maintenance plan, where you get the year-round checkups and you get discounts on repairs when you subscribe to the home maintenance plan. It's a small monthly fee, but it's well worth it in the big picture for the preventive maintenance. Lee Company, proud sponsor Nashville Predators, 615-567-1000 or LeeCompany.com.
D Mace, Vingan, and Donick, 1025, 1063. The game, Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, joined in studio by Terron Davenport, ESPN NFL Nation Titans reporter. If you have questions for Terron, 615-737-1025. We have one texter along those lines, Terron, we were talking about Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. One texter wants to know if either of them is worth the number one overall pick in your mind. And I will add on to this because you were touching on it a little bit. Which player best fits what Brian Callahan wants to do and why?
I think, well, if you go by what Brian Callahan wants to do, well, first off, yes, both are worthy of a first-round pick. If you go by what Callahan wants to do, I believe Shedeur Sanders is the better fit. He is the most accurate quarterback in this draft class. I think he's the most on-time quarterback in this draft class. He's the most unwaverable quarterback in this draft class. Now, Cam Ward is a close second, and I'll put Will Howard in there as well when you talk about unwaverable. But I believe those two, are the top, and Shedeur is at the top. So when you look at a guy that could come into a mess and still thrive, I think that's what you have in Shedeur. When you talk about the most likely to be able to do that. So if I believe that if this draft was going, this selection was going, okay, we got to give Brian Callahan the best opportunity to succeed now, is Shedeur Sanders.
One question that everybody has when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, when the Tennessee Titans announced that they had fired Ran Carthon, we got a quote tweet from Deion Sanders. And one thing that we hear on all of the talking head shows is the influence of Deion Sanders, the impact of Deion Sanders. During the break, I likened him to a pageant mom. You watch those shows where the girls are doing the beauty pageants and the moms are very involved in their child's life, probably too involved. I know I'm being a bit hyperbolic. I would love to know, based on what you know, like how much is Deion Sanders a factor in all of this? How much does his presence play a role in what team decides to draft Shedeur Sanders?
Well, I think it plays a big role. And even though he can't per se like absolutely dictate where Shedeur Sanders goes, I think he could dictate how smoothly the process goes. And when you're trying to run a football team, like the last thing you want to have to deal with are the stupid little fires that tend to come up, regardless of whether it's Deion Sanders or anyone else. It's a part of the thing. So the more you can minimize that to focus more on what you got to do on the field and put on the field, the better. So I think that could. Now, I just wonder how that this organization will be able to deal with that. That's the question.
That's the follow-up I have too on the Sanders faction, the Deion Sanders seems to me, just from afar, don't know him at all, very driven to succeed, not only for the program he's heading up in Colorado, but also it seems motivational to him that he's doing it with Shedeur as his quarterback and his other son in there as well.
Shiloh.
Yeah, and that's exciting for him. It's a special, unique life experience that they have done a great job. It's been so fun to watch. When that era ends and both of his sons have moved on and he doesn't have that, how driven is Deion to continue to run a college program that we know in today's college age, it is a very stressful job where you have to turn over your roster so much every year. There's so much work that goes into it.
Yeah.
What's the next stage of Deion? Because Deion has done a lot of things. He's a talented guy. He could do almost anything he would choose to do.
Well, there's a video of him speaking to the team for the first time without Shiloh and Shedeur.
Where is Shiloh, by the way? Is he done playing?
Shiloh's done.
So he's going to go pro as well.
Both of them are done.
Yeah.
Like both of them are gone. So, and he said that he's looked forward to the opportunity to just be a coach. He said, I love that I don't have to be coach and dad at the same time. I could just be a coach. So that tells me he wants to continue.
Okay, so when he's coaching Colorado, how much of a pageant mom does he have budgeted in his time? You know,
I mean,
we know what kind of work goes into.
He's had time, these past couple of years. So I don't see how he's still doing his Barstool obligations and stuff like that. So he'll find time.
Terron, the news yesterday in the NFL, Mike Vrabel back in the saddle as an NFL head coach. He joins the New England Patriots, as I called it earlier, the worst kept secret in the NFL. I asked Willie this question, and as someone who worked with Mike Vrabel on a daily basis, I would love to hear your response to this question. Oftentimes when we switch jobs, if we lose our job, we take stock of ourselves. What would I do differently this time around so that the next time I get a job, I'm in a better position to succeed? Now, Vrabel did have a lot of success in Tennessee, but my point is, if you were advising Mike Vrabel and you said, Mike, this is what happened in Tennessee that may have gone wrong, and I would suggest that you try something different in New England, what would you suggest?
Two things. I would suggest being more open to other ideas. Mike Vrabel, because he's excelled so much in this arena, he's going to be convinced that he has the right way. And for the most part, he does. I would be open, though, to other ideas. And I think the other thing is be more emotionally stable. Because, again, he's been so successful in this league. Like, the dude hates losing. Like, I remember that season 2022, just watching him, he hated it. Because of that, there were times he would go in that building and he would bring a cloud and put that cloud right over the building. But when they were winning, that cloud was gone. It was sunny as June 21st. You know what I mean? July 5th, we should say, because that's my birthday. But, that's the thing. He has to be more consistent.
No disrespect to those of you who were born on June 21st.
Right.
Yes. So to follow up on that, Terron, I'm curious what he's stepping into in New England, because he was part of a run of success that may never be duplicated. So you have the bar set so high.
Mm-hmm.
You had the owner sort of rearrange everything after 1 year so they could get him specifically. That's what it looks like to me anyway. They shortchanged Gerard Mayo, pulled the plug quick because I think, and I can't prove this, but like, this is my chance to get Vrabel. This is who the fans love. We remember all the glory days. But this is what I'm getting at. How long do you think the leash is? Because I look at their roster. They haven't drafted very well. They don't have a long list of guys that they can build around currently.
They do appear to have the quarterback, though.
Appear, yes. Sure thing? I don't know. Like I got a lot of people in my family that watch the Patriots every week. They're encouraged by Drake May without question, but there's a difference between being encouraged and looking good. Let's take the Titans game where he led him back. There's some really good things there. But does that mean he is the guy? That still has to be determined. So what is that dynamic going to be like for Vrabel, knowing what the expectation level is, what that fan base expects, and where they are right now?
I think it's going to be high expectations, but I think that organization, because of his history with them, he's going to have time. I don't think that they're expecting an immediate turnaround. Now, would they like to be better than the number 4 pick in the draft? Oh yeah, for sure. So improvement could be 6 or 7 wins. I want to see what he does, right? Because I mean, you're not coming into a team that has Marcus Mariota, Derrick Henry, and a nice offensive line that just
DeMarco Murray.
Murray. Well, Murray was gone when he. But that just beat the Chiefs. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and lost to the
good
Patriots.
point. Yeah, he came in the year after. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to see how he could build that out. I believe Mike Vrabel is going to have that team successful in a year or two. That's my belief, but we'll see.
Let's see if we have any other questions for Duran. You can get them in at 615-737-1025. Dylan says, if you get Mike Vrabel a decent or good offensive coordinator, then he's absolutely the best. We were talking about Josh McDaniels' name has been.
That's who Florio went with last night when they got into the Vrabel thing.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah,
sounded
that's who
like
Gronk said.
Yeah.
Gronk was like,
so that's the name swirling. Of course, that's worked for them.
I would do it. Why not? Why not?
Dustin in Hopkinsville says, I feel Amy Adams-Strunk's only chance at winning is to get Dion and Shador as a package deal. Get out of Dion's way. Let the circus begin. Larger than life personality tells Amy to sit down and hush. Get Dion on the payroll.
They need a safety too, so should do it. Shiloh too. Why not?
Travis Hunter is another player who is going to be at the top of the draft. The number one question, of course, is which position would the drafting team play him at? If it were up to you, which position would you play him at? And especially if he were to come here, where would you play him?
Playmaker. I'm getting everything I can from him on offense. I'm gonna have him. You better learn the X, the Z, and the slot. And oh, by the way, we're gonna put you back there, and you're gonna return punts and kicks too. We're gonna maximize. You want to play 100 snaps a game in college? Okay, no problem. We're not gonna play you on offense and defense, but you're gonna play your position as playmaker.
So this is what I've heard thrown out there about Hunter. He'll play. This is what one philosophy would be. Plays regularly on defense. It has packages on offense. Does that sound? But or are we playing both sides just like Colorado? Just roll them out there as much as you can. How would you do it?
I'm reversing that. He's playing offense. I don't think
he's playing wide receiver
as a corner. To be honest,
okay,
with you. Interesting. He's good. I don't think he's elite.
So you think his primary position should be wide receiver?
Absolutely.
Now I hear this thrown out there with him. Generational. Now, to me, that's not a term that you can throw out there lightly. And sometimes I think probably it could be thrown out too much.
Mm-hmm.
But there are guys that when you say that, my eyes light up and go, wait a minute now. So
he's generational in that he could play both sides of the ball.
But to me, that's not what I want to know. If I have the first pick, I want, is this guy that good?
He's a
that
generational
I've got to move everything
talent.
Aside. That this is the first pick. I've got to take him.
He's generational college-wise. I think he's elite, top level, pro-wise.
Okay. Who are the other players that you deem top 3 to 5 worthy? If as we set the table for what we're saying.
You got the 2 quarterbacks. You got Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter. If you didn't watch the Notre Dame game, go back and watch it.
With one arm,
one arm. Like that dude.
That was amazing.
He's legit. Those are the 4 right there. After that, I think there's a step down. Ted McMillan is a very good receiver.
That's the receiver out of Arizona.
Yep. I don't know that I use a top 5. No, I'm not going to say I don't. I wouldn't use a top 5 pick on him, but he's right there. You got Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell. These are both offensive linemen. They're tackles, but they're probably going to bump inside to play guard. So those are guys. I still believe Luther Burden III is up there as well. You could put, that's probably it.
One texter says Travis Hunter is Ted Ginn 2.0.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Ted Ginn used to fly, man.
He sure could.
He used to fly.
But I think you would say Ted Ginn, first pick in the draft. I don't know if that's the franchise-changing thing that you would hope for generational.
Well,
I mean, he was a very good player for a long time.
Extend what the texter said, what we hoped Ted Ginn would be 2.0. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah. That's fair. Terron, I'm glad that you could be in with us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. Good to be here.
Terron Davenport, you can hear him all over our station. We always love his expert analysis. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, a report surfaced over the weekend featuring a prominent Predators player. Willie and I will discuss that next. Willie Donick, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Hey, this is Derek Mason. You heard me tell you about Dr. Lodge at Cool Springs MD for some time now. If you set out to lose weight, chances are it's not your first time setting a goal to shed some extra pounds, only to face disappointment or come up short. But at Cool Springs MD, Dr. Lodge and his team understands the frustration of this cycle, and that is why they offer a different approach to weight loss. Their comprehensive weight loss program is led by Dr. Jeffrey Lodge and addresses the root cause of weight gain with tailored nutrition, exercise, blood test supplements, and more. They will customize a program specific to you. So connect with Dr. Lodge at CoolSpringsMD.com today to schedule your appointment for a personalized weight loss plan just for you. That's Cool Springs MD, where your weight loss journey becomes a success story.
D Mace, Finnegan, and Donick, 1025, 1063 the game. Big thanks to Terron Davenport for sitting in with us. Love talking football with TD. Few, if any, people know as much about the sport as Terron Davenport. The Nashville Predators back in action tomorrow night as this 5-game homestand resumes. They lose 4-1 to the Washington Capitals on Saturday night. They have the Vegas Golden Knights, the league-leading Vegas Golden Knights, tomorrow night at Bridgestone Arena. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, right here on 1025 and 1063 the game. Saturday night, during the second intermission of Hockey Night in Canada, our dear friend Elliot Freeman, who joins us every Thursday at 1 o'clock, does his Saturday headline segment. It's must watch if you're a hockey fan. I always seek it out. And the first report, the first nugget of information in that report on Saturday involved Ryan O'Reilly. This was Elliot Freeman on Hockey Night in Canada discussing Ryan O'Reilly and his future with the Nashville Predators.
Yes, Ryan O'Reilly, when he signed with the Predators before last season, Ron, he signed a 4-year deal. There was no protection in there, trade or no movement clause, nothing like that. And there's been some speculation this year, and I think the Predators have been called about O'Reilly, and the respect that he has across the league is so high. People want to know if he could be available. And here's what I understand the Predators are telling teams. They are saying he may not have protection language in his contract, but he is being treated as if he has a no-move clause. I think the Predators' preference is to keep him because they want him to win, especially when they start to put the pieces back together at the end of this year. And also they see him as a leader on and off the ice. However, they are going to at least consider it under 2 conditions. Number one, the offer has got to be something that really excites them. It really has to be a great offer. And number 2, it has to be something O'Reilly would agree to. And as far as I can tell at this point in time, I don't believe O'Reilly has indicated in any way, shape, or form he is looking to move. So with O'Reilly, it's something that really has to excite Nashville, and B, it would have to be something that he would be comfortable with if it gets to that point.
That was Elliot Freeman on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday. So, Willie, according to Elliot Freeman, the Predators are treating Ryan O'Reilly, who has 2 years left on his contract with a $4.5 million cap hit. He has no trade protection in his contract, like zero trade protection in his contract.
Right.
So the Predators theoretically are free to do whatever they want with Ryan O'Reilly. But according to Elliot Freeman, he is being treated as if he has a no trade or no movement clause. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you see right away what the respect level is with what Ryan O'Reilly is about. If there is a guy on that team that you want in your foxhole every night, whether you're winning or not winning, that's the guy I want in my foxhole. That's just my observation. I don't think I would be alone in that take. As I have watched them struggle as a group, he's a guy that continues to set the right example and play hard every night. I'm not saying the other guys don't, but I think they have continued to play hard. That Saturday was a great example of how things have gone. I would say that they really didn't play very well at the beginning of the season. I think what the theme has become since they dug the hole is they have fought hard to dig out of the hole, and it's just not fallen their way. They outplayed the Capitals and somehow lost the game 4-1. It's baffling.
Outshot the Capitals 33-16 and lost 4-1.
Yeah, and expected goal. All of the things that you line up to do, because it's not always in the shots that tell you everything, but everything that you're trying to check is what do you do to win a game? They did accept the result, and it's killing them. It is weighing them down. They can't figure it out why it's happening. But when that's going on, do you crack or do you still keep the locker room full of guys that are saying, guys, we got to get through this. We're going to get through this together. Ryan O'Reilly is a leader in that leadership room, and you can see it every night. There's no difference in how he plays. So that being said, that's why he's so coveted by other teams. They know that he could be a difference maker that could come into a team and move the needle at a position that's really hard to find.
So here are a couple of my assorted thoughts on this. First, I'm not sure what the market will be for Ryan O'Reilly. He's 33. He will turn 34 next month. So he will be 34 at the NHL trade deadline, which is in early March. He has 2 more seasons under his contract at $4.5 million per season, as I said. I can't think of a recent trade involving a player with that situation. This feels more like an off-season trade than a deadline trade. Keep in mind that when O'Reilly was traded a couple of years ago at the deadline from St. Louis via Minnesota to Toronto, because it was a 3-team trade, he was 32 years old. He was a pending unrestricted free agent. He had 2 other teams retaining salary. That's why he was traded from St. Louis to Minnesota, and then Minnesota to Toronto, I should say. You know, the Blues netted a first-round pick out of that deal, among other things. I don't think you're getting that value for Ryan O'Reilly. So I'm not sure what his value is. If he was a pending unrestricted free agent, it would be easier for me to figure that out. Having 2 more years left on his contract, I'm having a difficult time pulling out a recent trade that says, well, this is the blueprint that the Predators should use. Here's my other part about this. And this was my gut reaction, Willie, when I heard this report from Elliott. I don't like it, and I'll tell you why. Let's say, as Elliott said, 2 things have to happen. The Predators have to get an offer that they would consider making the trade. And then O'Reilly needs to be open to that potential destination. What if the Predators get that trade? I'm just going to throw a team out there. Boston. Let's say the Bruins call the Predators and give them an offer that they can't refuse. But they go to Ryan O'Reilly and he says, I don't want to go to Boston. Are you just going to say, well, unfortunately, Boston, we're not going to do this? I know this is like worst case scenario, but I think it pays, especially in this scenario, to be a little ruthless. And
if that's what you want to do, you're saying, if ultimately you're searching for a blockbuster deal that blows you away.
Right. My fear would be that the Predators would get a team that, for all of the reasons you stated, he's a proven winner. He's a leader. He has shown he can play big in the playoffs. Teams covet that sort of thing. If a team that is desperate for that calls the Predators, but Ryan O'Reilly has no interest in going to that team, what are you going to do? I mean, would they reconsider? Would they say, Ryan, I know this is what we said, but we can't turn this down? I don't know. But the Predators have 2 players on their roster right now who are the perfect example of teams maybe making the hard decision, but it working out. The Tampa Bay Lightning moved on from Steven Stamkos. Are the Tampa Bay Lightning the legitimate Stanley Cup contender that we have known them to be this year? Probably not. They have 4 players with 20 goals right now. They're not hurting without Steven Stamkos. It paid for them to be a little ruthless.
They're still among the highest scoring teams in the NHL.
Right.
And that's a year after having Stamkos with 40 goals. So they've managed to continue to score goals without him.
The Vegas Golden Knights, the Predators' opponent tomorrow night at Bridgestone Arena, played hardball with Jonathan Marchessault. You could tell when he did interviews after he got signed here, there were some bitter feelings between he and the Golden Knights. The Golden Knights have made their franchise history about being ruthless, trading players. Like Marc-Andre Fleury is the perfect example. He was the original face of that franchise, and when it was time for them to move on, they moved on. The Vegas Golden Knights are not hurting without Jonathan Marchessault. My point is that I don't like the idea, like my worst case scenario in this, Willie, and this is where my mind tends to go with these sort of things, so perhaps forgive me, is that the Predators are given an offer that blows away anything that I can think of for Ryan O'Reilly, and he doesn't want to go there, and they say, well, we told Ryan O'Reilly we would check with him, and he doesn't want to go play for you, so sorry.
My first thought, because you're right, I do think that's kind of a worst case scenario. I think this could play out a lot of different ways. My first thought was, for that to get out with Elliott in such a big, on the biggest stage you could get something out on, what kind of conversations have taken place behind the scenes with Ryan's agent, with Ryan himself? Have they presented this to him? Because I would have to say that the answer is yes, but my guess, but I don't know that. I had no idea that had even been brewing. I would say this, it's a great position from this standpoint if you're Barry Trotz. If I'm Barry Trotz, I am perfectly content keeping Ryan O'Reilly on my team for the length of his contract. I think he's going to continue to bust his butt to be in great shape and help a team win. I see no deterioration, really. He is going to be rock solid. He is not a number 1 center, I don't think, on a big-time winning team.
No, he's a perfect third-line center.
Oh, and I think is still a very good second-line center. I think he's going to get you 20-something goals. He's going to check the top players on the other team. He's going to be a team guy. He's going to help you win in a lot of different ways. That will be the case, I think, until he's done playing. So that being said, he sets the example for the younger players that are essential for this franchise and where they're going to go. So I'm perfectly content keeping him on the team for that reason. And so if I'm going to even open up the possibility of trading him, I know that I don't have to trade him as long as you've had these conversations and he's on board with where they're going to go from him here. Because on the other hand, if somebody makes you an offer that just somebody's going all in, like the Capitals, who went all in to try to win and traded Philip Forsberg, their first-round pick, who was doing great things as an 18-year-old. Less than a year after they picked him, they traded him to get Martin Erat. These are the kind of things that could happen that I think if you're Barry Trotz, you're at least want to be open to, right? So is Ryan O'Reilly on board with that? So I think it's a good position to be in when you go to a car dealership and you're not saying, man, I don't have a car. My car doesn't work. I've got to buy a car today in this lot. That puts that dealer in a great position. Whereas if you're like, I like my car. I'm looking at, can you give me a good deal? If I get a good deal, yeah, I'll buy this car from you. But I can drive my car off the lot. I'm fine for the next couple of years with the car that I have. You're in a much better bargaining position.
My hope is that if something were to happen where a team were to come to the Predators with a deal for Ryan O'Reilly, and it was a deal that they weren't expecting, and it was a deal that was better than they anticipated, that although they have reportedly told this to Ryan O'Reilly, I'm hoping that they are not beholden to that, because at this point, I don't think that you can prevent yourself from getting those future assets just because a player doesn't want to go there who doesn't have trade protection. I think it's part of me is like, it's admirable. It's that they're doing this for Ryan O'Reilly. It shows, as you said,
Right.
the respect they have for him.
The other part of the equation is Barry Trotz his vision, I think, is to bounce back next year, barring the incredible ride that would have to be in the second half to get back into it. If this is a lost season, I think the goal is to hop back and feel like you can win next year. You have to consider that anything. And I think Ryan O'Reilly could be part of a winning team for somebody next year. I know he can.
That'll do it for us today. We will be at Bridgestone Arena tomorrow. Predators and Golden Knights. Puck drop at 7. Pregame at 6. We'll be glad to be back at Bridgestone Arena. Derek Mason will be back with us as well tomorrow. Stillman and Company coming up next on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. And on behalf of Derek, be loved, love on your people. Have a wonderful start to your week. Peace.